Hey guys, in this tutorial series you will get an introduction to Django in just 30 days. I will begin by installing and setting up Django, and I'm going to be using a Mac, but the procedure is fairly similar on Windows and Linux as well. Next I will continue by explaining how things work and similar, and after this I will build an application. The most important part of this tutorial is to learn about Django, how it works and similar, and not about the application itself. The project we are going to build is a to-do application with authentication, categories, pagination, emails, etc. So this will definitely go beyond the typical basic to-do application. We will build the application piece by piece, and I will introduce lots of important features of Django. Here is an outline of the next 30 days. Day 1 will be introduction to the project and the series. Next we are going to go to installation and setting up Django, and then you will create your first app and then your first view and template. Next we are going to run the site, learn how to extend templates, and then we're going to head over to building your first model. Next we are going to handle the Django admin interface, learn how to get dynamic data from the database, and then we're going to add one more app to the application, and then we're going to learn about connecting models. Next we're going to list out categories and also have a detailed view for the category. And then we're going to do some optimizations by separating URLs files. And then we're going to head into Django forms, make it possible to edit tasks, setting them to complete and also delete them. After this we're going to add a little simple search to the application, and then we're going to do a little bit work with the design by implementing Tailwind. And after this we're going to head over to authentication. We're going to learn how to sign up users, log them in and log them out. After this we're going to customize the forms a little bit, and then we're going to get the specific users' data from the database. After this we're going to work with model functions and how to structure these. And then we're going to do some work with template filters and then pagination. After this we're going to look at the messages framework that comes built in with Django and how to send emails. And that's the next 30 days. And this series will be perfect for beginners and people who want to dive into Django. I will explain things as well as I can, so if you're already tried Django but don't understand it good enough, this series will hopefully be very helpful to you too as well. For day 1 I just wanted to tell you about the project and this series. As a little task you can check out djangoproject.com to get a little introduction to the framework. You can also sign up for free on my website Stein.com or follow me on X. You will find all links in the description below. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll catch up tomorrow when the real fun begins. Hey guys, in this part we will install and create a virtual environment and install Django into it. You can install Django a couple of different ways. Directly on your computer, in a virtual environment, a virtual machine, Docker, etc. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. In this tutorial we're going to stick with the virtual environment. This is really easy to get started with, and it's one of the recommended ways to do it. A virtual environment is a little isolated environment on your computer. And when it's activated, we can install Python packages like Django for this environment only. It also makes it very easy to maintain and deploy, because we can replicate the environment on a server and similar. Python 3 comes with a built-in solution for virtual environments called venv. This is what we are going to be using. So just create a new folder on your computer and navigate there in the terminal, just like I have done here in To Do. Next we will create a fresh environment by running this command, python 3-m venv, and then the name of the environment which is just going to be env, and hit enter. The -m means that we are running the module venv as a script. Great, now we have the virtual environment, so we can go ahead and activate it by saying source env bin activate and hit enter. Then you can see the name of the environment is prepended here before my username. If I want to deactivate this, I can just say deactivate, and then we see we're back here to the default. So let's just activate it again, so everything is ready to install Django. And to install Django, we just say pip install Django. And this will then download and install the newest stable version of Django, which currently is 5.2.7. Don't worry if it's slightly different on your computer. And now that we have Django installed, we can also create a blank project. We do this by saying django-admin start project to do and hit enter. And the django-admin command was made available when we installed Django into this environment. If I was to open up a new window now in the terminal, it will not be available there before I activate the environment. So if I now just open up this folder in an editor, we can go through the files that has been created by this command we just ran. So now you can see here the name of the folder we were in to do there. And this created a new file called manage.py. And manage.py looks like this. And this is sort of scripts for doing administrative tasks. We will be using this many times during this series. And we're going to use it, for example, to create super users for the admin interface. We use it to interact with the database and create Django apps and similar. Right now we just don't have to think too much about this. Then inside the root folder we also got one more folder called to do. And this is the configuration folder for the Django project. Here we can see 5 new files. We have this __init __.py file, which is just an empty file. And even though it's empty, it still has a function. This makes Python treat this folder as a module, so it's very easy to reference the files in here from other places in this project. Next we have the asgi.py file. This is a file for the web server, which we're going to be used later. You're not going to use this asgi file, but the wsgi file. And this is entry points for the web server and will only be used if the project supports asynchronous views. For example, if you have a real-time chat or similar, you will be using this instead of this file. But enough of that right now. Then we have the settings.py. And this is where we put all of the settings for the whole project. Global settings like the secret key, middlewares, where templates are located, what database we are going to be using, rules for the password, time zone, language, etc. Then we have the urls.py, and this is sort of like a table of contents for the whole project. The web server uses this file to find out what URL you are coming from and then render a view based on this. And then we have the wsgi file, which is similar to the asgi file. It's just entry points for the web server, so you sort of go into this file first and then into settings and then into URLs and then into the view you are going to show the user. This might be a little bit too much information for you to understand right away, but as soon as we start working with all of these files, they will probably make much more sense. Anyways, now we have an empty Django project and we're ready to start digging into more tomorrow. I'm trying to go through a little bit each day and hopefully I'm not overwhelming you with information. I can guarantee you that we will start coding very soon. See you in the next video. Hey guys, and welcome back. Now it's time to create your first Django app and learn what it actually is. So what is an app? First of all, we have created a Django project called To Do. And a Django project usually exists of multiple apps. It's not necessarily easy to explain what a Django app is, so I will give you an example. The project we are going to build in this series will be a task manager. And it's not a very complicated project, so we'll probably just have one app called task and one category. And the task app will consist of a few files, and the same with the categories. We will have one file where we describe the database, what information we are going to store there, for example the title of the task, a description, if it's done or not, and this is called a model. There will also be one file called views, which will be the views, and this view will get information from the database and render it inside a template. I will go through each of these when I just created one. let's say that we also had a user profile for the project. Then we would have one more app for this. It's not impossible to have everything inside one really big app, but it's not a very good practice because it will make a lot of mess in your code. That's why we want to split things up into smaller chunks. So to create the first app, we need to run one command. Be sure you are in the same folder as manage.py, as you can see here. And to create the Django app, we just say Python manage.py start app task and hit enter. So if I now go back to the editor, you'll see that I have this up here as well. So now you have created your first Django app. But even though you have created it, Django doesn't actually know that this exists. That's where the settings.py file come in handy. So if you go in here, you'll see that we have a block called installed apps. There are already a few that comes built into Django, like for example static files for showing or using CSS files. You have auth for authenticating users. Sessions is also for authentication. You have the admin interface, where you can see here. And at the bottom of the list here, we can say task. This just references this folder here called task. And since this also has this init.py, it's a module, so this is then the way we reference a folder. So let's go through each of these files in the folder that was created. You have the init.py, which is the same as down here, for making Python treat this as a module. Then we have the admin.py, which is currently empty. This is where we register database models with the built-in Django admin interface. We can also do some configurations to them, like adding search, filtering, and similar. We will come back to this later. apps.py is configurations for this app only. models.py is where we define what information we want to store in the database. For example, since we have a task, we probably want a title, a status, a description, and what category this task belongs to. Next we have the tests.py, and in this file we can write tests for the app to make sure that everything is working as it should. So here we can create automated tests for testing different things. Last we have the views.py, which is where we get information from the database. Maybe we do something with that information and then we render it inside a template. And just like the files in the root folder, this might be a little bit too much information at once because you have very little context to understand everything. In the next part we will finally start coding, and I promise that everything will start to make much more sense then. See you in the next video. Hey guys, now it's time to create the first view and template. So first of all, what is a view? A view can be used for a variety of tasks. A typical view can either be just to render a simple template, you can get information from the database and render it in the template, and similar. Essentially what happens is that Django loops through the urls.py file and tries to find a path that matches the URL you're visiting. And when Django finds this path, it will be connected to a view. And this view will get information, do things to the information or similar, and then render it as a template. There are two main different ways to create views in Django: function-based views and class-based views. For beginners, it's usually easier to understand function-based views at the beginning, so this is what we are going to be sticking to in this tutorial. The front page view. Let me show you an example and then explain what's going on. So let's open up views.py and create the view for the front page. Here is a def front page where you can see that this is a typical Python function. It takes one parameter called request. And then in here we say return a render request and then a path to the template that we want to present to the user. So you just say task/frontpage.html. So as you can see here at line 1, we import a function called render from Django shortcuts. This will just be used to render a template with information that we put into it. And then at line 4, we have a function called front page, which takes this parameter called request. And the request parameter contains information about the request, like the browser, IP address, if it's a post or get request, and much more. We will use this much more later in this series. At the next line we use the render function, where we just first pass in the request parameter so it can be used in the template as well, and then the path to the template. Let's say that we wanted to pass in more information to the template. You can then create a simple variable here called title. This is the front page. And if you wanted to make this variable available in the template, we can just pass it in at the end here as a dictionary. Title and title. So this name, you can call it whatever you want here, and then this is just a reference to this variable up here. So that was the first view. Oops. Front page, request, I don't know what I did there. Save. Next is a short introduction to the templates. A template is usually just a simple HTML file. You use HTML just as you are used to, and then Django makes it impossible to use different tags and blocks to make the template dynamic. Django uses a template language very similar to Twig, Ninja, and similar, so it's very easy to understand. Let's begin by setting up the template for the front page. This will make it much easier to understand what's going on. So we can begin by creating a new folder called templates inside the task app. So we create this templates, and Django will automatically look for a folder called templates inside each of the apps that we have. Inside this folder I want to create one more folder called task, because this is how we can separate the apps from each other. So we have the same name for the folder inside the templates as the app name itself. And then in here we create the template, front page.html, save it as front page.html, and then here we can say div class front page and h1 test, or maybe we can actually show the variable that we put in here. Then we can say double curly braces title, like that. This is just some hard-coded random text. Close the paragraph and close the div and save. So now we have the template as well. So this now just essentially tells Python to render this view and show the title inside this h1 block, and this is just static hard-coded text. So that wasn't too hard, I hope. Most of this is just pure HTML. The only Django thing here is these curly braces, which is used by Django to print information inside a template. So now we have created our first view and template. And in the next part of the series we will finally test the project and see it in action in a web browser. See you in the next video. Hey guys, it's time to run the development server and test our website in the browser. The project is almost ready for testing. We just need to add a front page to the list of available URLs. It's best practice to have separate urls.py file for each of the Django apps. But in this part we will only stick to the main urls.py file to keep things as simple as we can. And I will come back to this later to fix it. So let's open up todo/urls.py. First we need to import the front page view. So above this list here you can say from task.views, then we just reference this app called task and the file views.py. Import front page. Next we need to add this to the list of URLs. So inside this URL patterns list we add the path here. So path empty, and when the path is empty in the browser we want to render the front page view. And to do that we just say front page. So then we pass in the view which we just imported here. We can also give this a name so it's easier to reference this other places in the app. So we can pass in front page here as well. Remember to add the comma at the end there, that's very important. Nice. So now we can continue to the testing. We want to run the web server. So let's go to the terminal. And for development purposes, Django comes with a built-in web server that we can use while testing. To run this, you need to go to the command line and make sure that you're in the same folder as as manage.py again. And when we are here, we can say python 3 manage.py run server. And then you can see here that I get the red warning. You can just ignore this for now. We will come back to this later. Below here you can see which version of Django we are using and which settings file has been loaded by the web server. Next you can see here that we are starting the development server at this IP address, and we can open up this in the browser. So if I just copy this and open up Chrome and then just paste the address there, then you will see this is the front page. And this comes from this variable here that was passed in here. It was then printed in there. Now we see it here in the browser. This is just the hard-coded text that we did below here. So this might not be very impressive yet, but hang in there. In the next part we will dive deeper into templates, learn how to extend them and similar. See you in the next video. Hey guys, and welcome back. One of Django's most important thing is that you shouldn't repeat yourself. So in this part we're going to learn how to reuse parts of template. A few days ago we created our first Django template, but it lacks many things. A valid HTML page at least needs a HTML tag, the head tag and the body tag. But we don't want to keep writing these for all of the templates we create. The solution is to extend templates. In other words, we're going to create a base template with the necessary HTML tags, and we're going to add a menu there, a footer and similar. Let's begin by creating a new file called base.html inside the templates folder, the same folder where we have the the front page.html. So create a new file called base.html, and it should look something like this. We add the doc type at the top, and then HTML and head, and then we have the title to do, close it, and then we can close the head tag, we can close, open up a body tag and close the HTML tag like that. In the body here, I just want a very simple nav, menu, close it, just fix the indentation like this, and footer like that. Okay, not a very impressive or complicated template, but anyways, let's make it impossible to the front page to extend this template now. So what we want to make it possible is to insert data between the navigation bar and the footer. So here we're going to insert something called a tag block from Django. So use the curly brace percentage and say block content. And then we say and block like this. Content is just a typical name that I use for the content itself. You can call this whatever you want, like home or box, but content makes much sense in this context here. We will add more later, but now we want front page to use this. So if you open up front page.html, and at the first line here we say curly brace percentage extends, and then we pass in here task/base.html and save. So now this extends the base.html file. And if I go in the browser now and refresh, it should only say menu and footer. So where is this now going? This will actually not be rendered because Django treats this as an extended template, and then we need to use blocks here as well to put the information into the base.html file. So here we can also say block content. This name needs to match this one. And at the bottom, and block. So if I save now, go back and refresh, you can see that everything from the front page.html is now rendered in here between the menu and the footer. Perfect. We could also, for example, up here in the title, say block title and close it right away, and block add a pipe there. And then on the front page here, above here, we can say block, title, welcome, and block. So now we will see that the title here says welcome, pipes or pipe to do. So the welcome comes from here and the rest comes from the base.html file. So if I had a contact.html, for example, we could say contact here and it will be contact pipe to do. So that's how easy it is to extend templates. Other things we can do with the template is to create partials. So inside the task folder here, we can create one more folder called partials. And in there, a new file, save this as nav.html. And we take these 3 lines and paste them in here. This can just be like it is. And then here we can say include task / partials / nav.html. Oops. Like that. So if you go back now, refresh, it does not exist because I wrote wrong HTML. Refresh, and then you can see here that it was like it was before. Perfect. You can do this for the footer as well, so we keep this template as tidy as possible. One more file, save it as footer.html, paste these 3 lines, and replace them with an include task partials / footer.html and save. Refresh and it's back to the way it was. Perfect. So that was it for this video. In the next we are going to talk more about the Django models. See you in the next video. Hey guys! In this video we are going to set up a database model for the tasks and learn a little bit more about our choices. What is a database model? A database model is used to describe to a database what information we want to store there, and also to make functionality to interact with it. It's probably easy to understand if I just show you the database for the tasks first. So let's open up the editor and find task/models.py. We can then create the model here for the task by saying class task and pass in models.model. This just tells Django that we're going to extend this class, or at least be using it. For the task, I want the title, so title equals models.char field, set the max length to 255. A char field is typically used for titles, names, and short strings with a maximum length of 255. So we pass in this parameter because this is mandatory by or required by Django for the char fields. A task should also have a simple description, so description equals models.text field. So a text field can have much more information. You can store HTML here or whatever you want, and it does not have a maximum length. We can though add 2 parameters here called blank equals true and null equals true. This makes these fields optional, so the user don't have to input anything here. The blank equals true tells Django that it's allowed to store empty strings here, and null equals true tells the database that we are allowing null in the database as a storage. Then the last field for now is done equals models.boolean field default equals false. So a boolean field is either true or false. So when we create this, we just set the value to be false at default. So when you create a task, it's not done. That's why you have this default set to false. Okay, we can save this for now. So next up is then to update the database itself. Every time we create a new database model or make a change to it, we need to update the database. And don't worry, it's just 2 simple commands. So let's just go to the terminal and stop the web server by hitting Ctrl+C. And to update the database, we say Python 3 manage.py make migrations. This will then create a migration script. And you can see here a little explanation on what's going on. We are going to create a new model called task. When you run this command, Django will also create some new files for us. And these files contains information about the database model we are going to create. And it's just more low-level Python script about the SQL. And I don't want to jump right into that right now. We can just ignore it for now. But even though we now have made the migrations, the database is not updated. So we need to run one more command, Python 3 managed by migrate. And then this will run the migrations itself. You can see down here, task 001 initial, that it was run. These are things that comes from Django. So usually you don't see this many things happens when you run this command. This was just because this was the first time we ran this command. And when this is done, a new table should have been created in the database and we are ready to continue. So for many people, the concepts of the models, databases, migrations, etc. can be a little bit confusing. And to make this easier to understand, I just skipped going into the migrations files for now. It's just not very important for beginners to understand, at least in my opinion. We will work more with models and its functionality later in this tutorial series. And in the next part, we're going to start using the Django admin interface and actually add some tasks to the database. See you in the next video. Hey guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn about the built-in Django admin interface to add data to the database. Django comes with a brilliant admin interface. This can be used to add, edit, delete, and view all of the data connected to our project. We can also add custom features and similar. Let's say that we wanted to add a few tasks. We can use the shell, or we can do this programmatically, but it's not very convenient right now. So let's create a super user and log in. Django comes with an authentication system, and this system has roles and permissions out of the box. So if you create a new user, that user will not automatically have access to the admin interface. We need permissions to do this. So in our case, we're going to create something called a super user. And this is done by running one command, Python 3 managed by create super user. Hit enter. Then we need a username. I use admin, and then an email address and a password. Super user created successfully. Perfect. So now we can try to run the server again. Python 3 managed by run server. Now we can go to the browser and just copy this address, open up a new tab and go to /admin. Now we will see the login page for the admin interface. So paste in the information you just created. And once you are logged in, you will see that you can see users and groups. If I click users, you will see the admin admin user I just created. You can change the password, you can set some personal information, and also here you can see what's happening with the permissions and roles. So where is the task model? Even though we registered our app in installed apps and similar, it doesn't automatically appear here in the admin interface. But luckily for us, it's very easy to do so. If we just go back to the editor and find admin.py in the task app. Then we can begin by importing the model we created. So from .models import task. And we can say .models because we are in the same folder as the models.py file. And to register this now, we just say admin.site.register, type in task. So if you go back and refresh now, you can see tasks here. Let's try to create one. Title, my first task, and then this is the description for the first task, and save. So now we know how to add tasks to the database. You can add one more, second task, just type some information and save. We can actually do a lot more cool things here, like adding search, filters, and some other cool things. So if we go back to the editor, and then below the import here, we can say class task admin. and here we pass in admin.modelAdmin. And if we wanted to, for example, show the title here and the date it was created and if it's done or not, then we can say list display equals and create a tuple title created. We don't have created at date, sorry, but we can say is done. So you can show these two fields. If I save now, go back and refresh, nothing happens because we need to pass in the task admin down here with the registration. So if you now save and go back and refresh, you will see here second task, first task, and the status. If I go into this and set this to done, go back, you can see here that we get a check symbol because this is done. And Django automatically handles Boolean fields like this, like the cross or the check. We can also have a little filter here on the side, so we can filter which tasks are done and not. So list filter equals is done. Add a comma there, go back and refresh. And we can say filter this by is done, yes, no, or all. Cool. We can also add a simple search by saying search fields. So what fields should we be able to search in here? I think the title and description is good. Go back and then we have a search at the top here and I can say first and we only see the first task. Great. So there are also much more things we can do here. We can add custom actions here. We can customize the look and feel of the admin interface and similar, but that will not be a part of this tutorial. So that was it for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please hit like below and subscribe to get more content like this. See you in the next video. Hey and welcome back. Now that we have some data in the database, it's time to get some from it and render it in the template we have created. So a few days ago we created our first database model and it looked like this. So we have the title, the description, and to check if it's done or not. What we want to do in this part is to get the data from the database and print it in the template in the front page.html. So let's begin by opening up views.py to get the data from the database. So right now it just looks like this, where we only have one hard-coded variable like this. So we can begin by importing the task model here. So below this import here from Django, we can say from.models import task. And then to get all of the tasks from the database, we just say tasks equals task. So we reference this and say dot objects, and from all of the objects we want all. And then to use the tasks in the template, we can append it here after the title, just say tasks and tasks. So this name can be whatever we want, and this just references this variable which contains all of the tasks. So then we can head over to the template, the front page.html, and below this paragraph we can loop through. And just like Django has this for printing, we can use curly brace, percentage to use functions, or loops and if statements. So here we can say for task in tasks. So we loop through all of the tasks in the tasks variable. And we close this by saying and for. And then in here we can print the name of the task. First we add a div and then a paragraph and say task.title. So now we're referencing this variable here, and title is of course what's coming from the model here. So if we save now, go back to the front page and refresh, you can say my first task and second task. If I go here, I can see here that one of these is done and the other one is not done. So we can do some changes in the views so that we are just getting the tasks that we should do. So if we go back to views.py, and instead of saying all here, we can say filter and say is done equals false. So now we get all of the task objects which has the variable or the value is done set to false. So if I refresh now, go back and refresh, I only get the first task. As you can see here, this is not done. Perfect. So that's how easily we can get the data from the database and present it in a template. See you in the next video. Okay, so now that we have learned how to get that from the database, I think it's time to add one more app and model to the project so that we can learn how to connect these afterwards. So I want tasks to have categories. So let's add one more app by going to the command line, stop the web server and say Python manage.py start app category and hit enter. And then if you remember from one of the previous parts, we need to go into settings.py and append it here in installed apps category. I like to have these alphabetically after the Django apps. You can do it in whatever order you want. So if we save now, we can open up category models.py and create the model for the categories. So here we say class category, pass in models.model, and the category should just have a title. So here you can say title equals models.char field. Max length can be set to 255 and save. So then we can update the database before we continue. So let's go back here and say Python manage.py make migrations. And now you can see that this file here was created. If you open up the migrations folder, and this file 001 initial, you can see here a little bit what Django is planning to do. So we are going to create a new model called category, and the fields we are going to have is ID, which Django adds automatically for us, and the title field, which is a char field. So then we're going to execute this by running the other command, Python manage.py migrate. So now we have a new model in the database. You can also register this in the admin interface. So if you go back and find admin.py in the category app, you can begin by importing the model from .models, import from .models import category, and then here admin.site.register category and save. So if we go back to the admin interface now and hit refresh, it is not working because I have not started the server again. Refresh, and now we have it here, categories. Great. But as you can see here, categories is misspelled, and that's because Django just automatically add an S at the end to try to pluralize this. So what we can do then is to actually override this by adding some customization to the model. So in models.py in the category app, we can add a new class inside this class here called class meta, which is sort of a configuration for this model. So here you can say verbose name underscore plural equals categories and save. If I then go back here and refresh, you can see that this is now renamed to categories. You can also add two categories, for example private and one called work. And now you can see here now that this says just category object 1, category object 2. And this is the class representation name for this model. And it doesn't say anything about the content or anything like that. We used the admin.py file in the other app to configure what we wanted to show here, but this can also be done in a different way. So if we find models.py again, we can add a function here, def underscore underscore str underscore underscore, and then we pass in self as the parameter. And this will then override the string representation of this class name. So I can just say return self.title. Self will then reference this class and title is this field. So So if we save now, go back and refresh, we will see private and work. Much better, because now we can recognize what the category actually is. And that was it for this part. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please hit like below, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so now we're going to make it possible to connect to models. We're going to connect the tasks to the categories, because we want to categorize the tasks into different categories. So there are a couple of ways to connect to database models. This is usually done with the foreign key or a many-to-many field. And in this part we will cover the foreign key. This is perfect for when we want one category to have multiple tasks. It also makes it much easier to find out which category one specific task belongs to. So you can begin by opening up models.py in the task app. And then here we need to import the category model. So from category.models import category. And I like to have the foreign keys at the top of all of the fields for a model. So here you can say category equals models.foreign key. And then we're going to reference this by just saying the class name or the model name. And to make it very easy to get all of the tasks belonging to a category, we can add something called a related name and say tasks. So now we can just say category.tasks to get all of the tasks for one category. And also, if we delete a category, if we want to delete all of the tasks belonging to this, so then we can say on delete and pass in models.cascade. This was not supposed to be a string. So then we cascade it down by deleting the category, and Django will find all of the tasks belonging to this. So when that is done, we need to update the database again. So let's just go to the terminal, stop the web server, begin by running make migrations. And now I have a little error here. It's impossible to add the non-nullable field category to a task without specifying the default, and that's because all of the tasks need to have a category. We have already created two categories in the database, the ID1 and ID2. So what we can do here is to say provide a one of default now and 1, and which value we want to store here. And we know that one of the categories has ID 1, so we can just hit 1 and enter. And when that is done, we run the migrate script. If we now run the web server again, go back to admin interface, go into one of the tasks, for example, second task, you can see that this is connected to the private category. Perfect. So that's how easily we can do this. We will come back to more of this later in this series, but for now, this is what was most important. See you in the next video. Okay, now that we have tasks and categories, but we are only showing the tasks here. Let's go ahead and show the categories as well. So we can go to the views.py in the task app, views.py, and import the model from category.models import category. And now we get all of the categories by saying categories, create a new variable, and say category.objects.all. And then we need to add this down here to the dictionary or the context, whatever you want to call this. And now these should be available in the template. So if I then just go to frontpage.html and below the tasks, let's just add an hr to separate these a little bit. For category in categories and for, and then in here we add a div and a paragraph as a category.title. We can close that and we can close that and save. So if I refresh now, you can see that we have the private and work. Great. You can see that this actually is sorted alphabetically, but if I add one more now, for example, alerts, and go back and refresh, you can see that the A is at the end, so it should be APW. We can do a little bit more configuration to the models here. In the meta, we can say ordering equals, create a new array and say name. Remember to add a comma here. Save, go back and refresh. Oops. Ordering refers to non-name. It was not supposed to be name. Title, of course, which is this one. Refresh, and then we have alerts, private, work. So now we have them sorted alphabetically. Great. And in the next part of this series, we will create a detail page for each of the categories. See you in the next video. So we have a list of categories, but we want to be able to click one of these and show the detail page, where we also can list out each of the tasks belonging to this specific category. So we can begin by creating the view for this by going into the editor and finding views.py in the category app. And then here we say def category, or we can say detail, for we want the detail view for the category app. In here we pass in request parameter, but we also need one more parameter here called pk, which stands for primary key, because we need the ID or the primary key for the category that we want to show. And then we want to get this from, then we want to get the category from the database by saying category equals category.objects.get, where primary key is primary key. So this refers to the field in the database, and this refers to this which we are going to get from the URL. This needs to be capital C. And then below here we can return and render using this function. So return render request category/detail.html, and then we need to pass in the category that we want to show. So category, and save. And then we need to set up the URL pattern for this. So if we open up todo/urls.py, we can begin by importing the page here from category.views import detail. And then we can add it here, path, and when the path is an integer called primary key, then we want to show the detail page. You can give it a name of category_detail, so it's easy to reference this other places. And save. And then if I open up frontpage.html, I just want to link this paragraph to this page. So here I can say href. Then I'm going to use one more function from Django called URL. And then we can just say category detail. And close this and close the anchor tag after the title. So now Django will just use the function called URL to find this here. And this can be found here, and then it will render the URL for us. I think it might not work right now because we need to provide the primary key. So if I just go back to frontpage.html, then after we have provided the name, we can say category.id and save. If I refresh now, you can see that this has been turned into links, and if I click, for example, private, then I get that the name category is not defined. Okay, we can solve that by going into views.py, and you can see that we have not imported the model yet. From .models import category, save, and if I go back to the browser, I will get one more error, but I just want to show you before I fix it. So if I refresh now, I will get a template does not exist error. Okay, so you can see that it was trying to find this template here, and we have not created it yet. So if I open up this folder and create one more, templates, and inside the templates folder, one more called category. And then in the category folder, we can create a file called detail.html. And to be a little bit lazy, I can go into frontpage.html and just copy these lines at the top here and paste it inside here. And here we can print out the category title, category.title. And the same here in the H1, we can say category.title. Close this one and end block. Save. So if I go back and refresh now, you can see that it's still not working, and this is just because I need to stop the web server, start it again and refresh. So then you can see private here and private there, which comes from the category. Perfect. Below this title we can show all of the tasks belonging to this category. So if I go back to the editor, go below here, then you might wonder how we can get all of the tasks. And in the models for the task you might remember this related name. We are going to be using that now. So first we can loop through all of the tasks in category, which is the variable we have here, .tasks.all. So then we get all of the tasks belonging to this category. Then in here we can add a div and a paragraph and say task.title. So if I save now, refresh, you can see that I get first task, second task. I could, if I wanted to, in the views here, get the tasks here, filter them by is done or not, but we're going to come back to that later in this series anyways. So for now we can just be happy that we were able to create a detail page and show all of the tasks for a specific category. So that was it for this part, and in the next part we're going to start customizing and working with the URLs files. See you in the next video. Hey and welcome back. Now we want to learn about how and why it's important to have separate urls.py file for each of the Django apps. So right now all of the URLs we have in the Django project is just placed inside the urls.py file in the main folder. And this is definitely not the best solution, because this file can become very long and unmaintainable, and it also doesn't make much sense to import all of the views into this file. So what we want to do now is to create separate URLs file for each of the apps, one for the task app and one for the category app. So inside of the task app we can create a new file called urls.py. And then first we are going to import path from Django. So from django.urls import path. And now we can import the views file from this app, from .import views. And then we set up the URL patterns. So URL patterns equals. And then in here is a path. And when the path is empty, we want to render views.frontpage. And this can still be called front page. Save. And if I then go back to the main urls.py file, we can remove this one and remove this import. And we just need to import one more function from django.urls called include. And then at the bottom here we can say path. And now also, if this is empty, we want to include and check all of the URLs inside task.urls. So first it will try to match with admin, then it will try to match with the primary key, and if it's empty, it's going to go inside this urls.py file and find this empty path and show us the front page. So if I refresh and go to the front page, it will still show us this. Great. So let's do the same thing for the category. Create a new file, urls.py. Begin by importing path from django.urls. And import the views file from import views and then the URL patterns. And in here we have the path, and we want to use the integer primary key. And then we want to render views.detail and give this the name of detail. Or was it category detail maybe? Let's check out the other urls.py file. Yes, category detail. So let's just go back to there, paste and save. Then we just need to update the main urls.py file. This can also check for empty path, include category.urls. So now it will match this one, whatever the URL is, and go into that file to check if any of them are matching. If not, it will continue to this file. So if I save now, I should be able to go into this, and it is still working as it did. Perfect. But this is much better now, because the main urls.py file should only just reference each of the apps that we have. So I can remove this import as well. So it was maybe not the biggest optimization, but if you have a big app, you will definitely notice the difference in your code when you're separating it like this. Okay, so that was it for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please hit like and subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, and welcome back. We have already learned how to add data in the admin interface. Now we're going to make it possible to add them from the front end. When we work with input from users in Django, we almost always want to use forms. I'm not just talking about HTML forms now, but a feature from Django. And by doing this, we keep best practices for security and similar. And the first thing we can do now is to just create a file called forms.py in the task app. So forms.py. And this file should look like this. We can begin by importing something called model form. So from django.forms import model form, and then we can import the task model. From.models import task, and then we're going to create a class for defining this form. So class task form. You can call it whatever you want, but the model name and then form is a great way, and it's easy to understand what this actually does. And we want to use the model form here so that we are expanding on this class. And then we add a class meta here for configuration for this form. And then we just want to specify which model we are using, which is obviously in this case the task here, and which fields we want to show in the front end. And the fields we want to show is title, we want to show the description, we want to show if it's done, and the category. Like that. So the model form will automatically generate HTML for a form for us. We just need to feed it the model and which fields we want to be showing. So let's go to views.py to create a view for actually rendering this template. First, let's import the form from .forms import. Sorry, I'm in the wrong file now. It's supposed to be in task views.py. So from .forms import task form, and maybe we can just show this on the front page because we want to make it very easy to create new tasks. So here at the bottom we can say form equals task form, and just have it empty instance like that, and then we can also append it to this context down here and save. And then to show this inside the template, we need to open up frontpage.html, and above the tasks we can create a new HTML tag form, set the method to be post, and the action can just be dot, because that's the page we are on. Then we close this, and then the first thing we need to add in here is a function or a tag called CSRF token. This stands for cross-site request forgery, which makes it impossible for other pages to submit data to your form backend. This will add a cookie or a string token that will be sent in with the form. And then to render the form, we can just say form.as_p, which will render this form as a paragraph. It could also be table if you wanted that, but p makes sense in our case. And then just a simple button for actually submitting this form. Submit and close. So if we go back now and refresh, you can see here that we can now see the form here, fill in title, description, if it's done or not, And we also have a list of categories belonging there. Great. If I try to submit this, it will not work. Even though I fill out all of the fields, nothing happens. And that's because we are not handling this in the backend. So that will be the next step in this process. If I go to the views.py in the task app again, above here we can say if request.method equals post. So now we finally learn a little bit more about this request parameter. This contains information if you have submitted a form or not. And as soon as you click this submit button, the request method will be post. And if it's not, it will be a get request, and then we can just set the form variable to be an empty instance of the task form. But if it is a post request, then we can create a new instance, task form, and just pass in request.post. So this also contains information about everything that's content of this form, like the title and stuff will be pasted in here. And then Django will handle the rest for us there. We just need to check if the form is valid. For example, if the user has filled out everything. So if form.is_valid, then Django will clean the form for us, so we don't have to think about if there are any XSS attacks or similar. So if it is valid, we can just say form.save. And then I want to redirect the user back to the front page. So return, redirect, /. And then we need to import this function. This is a shortcut from Django, so we can just paste it at the top there from Django.shortcuts, import render and import redirect. So then we don't need to do anything more here, but we can test this out now. So test3, add some information. You can add this to work, submit, and you can see here my first task and test3. Great. So now we have a form working for us that we can create new tasks with. Next step then is to make it possible to edit tasks. So tomorrow we will keep learning more about Django forms. See you in the next video. Hey and welcome back. Now it's time to learn more about forms and how to create an edit form for the tasks. We are actually just going to be using the same form as earlier, but I want to make a separate view and template for editing the tasks. You can begin with the template. If I just go back to my editor, we can find the templates there and the front page. So let's copy the lines, all of these, and create a new file called edit.html and paste this in. You can remove this paragraph and change the title to edit task, and the same up here, edit task. Close this one and close the end block. And that was it for this. We can maybe change this to save changes since we are editing a task. Then we need a view for handling this as well. So let's go to views.py and create a new view below the front page. So def edit task. Pass in the request parameter, but also the PK or the primary key for the task that we want to change. And we need to get this from the database by saying task equals task.objects.get, where primary key equals primary key. If you want to give an 404 error to the user if their primary key doesn't exist in the database, we can replace this with get object or 404. Pass in the model we want to use and say pk equals pk. And this is also a shortcut from Django, and it works very similar to the get method. Then we also want to check if this is a request method is post, and if it is, then and then we can copy this variable as well. But if we submit this form now, we will just create a new task. So we need to tell Django that there is an instance of this task already. So instance equals task. So then we just pass in the task that we are already editing. And then we do the same thing here. If form.is valid, and if it is, we say form.save. And we can redirect this back to the front page. And instead of this slash, we can say front page to reference the name that we are using here, which can be a little bit cleaner. And if it's not post request, then we say form equals task form and pass in instance equals task. So then we have some information in the form when we open up this page. Then we need to render this, return render request task slash edit.html, and we also need to pass in the form here, form and save. Okay, so we have come a long way now. Now we just need to add this to the urls.py here. So we have this for showing, but we need one more path for editing. So we can say edit underscore task, and then we want to find an integer here called pk, and then we're going to use the views.edit task view name edit task and save. So hopefully this looked familiar from the other part where we learned a little bit about this. Now we just need to add an edit button on the front page for each of the tasks. So below here we can add one more paragraph and say href. Want to use the URL function and reference the edit task name and pass in task.id, or we can say pk if we wanted to do that. Edit, close the primary key and close the paragraph. Go back and refresh. So now we have my first task, edit, test3, edit. Go into this, edited, save changes, and I'll redirect it to the front page, and you can see here that this is now have been edited. Perfect. So now we can add and edit tasks, and in the next part we're going to make it possible to set tasks to complete and also to delete them just by clicking a link. See you in the next video. Hey again. Now it's time to work more with the tasks. It's time to make it possible to complete and delete tasks. So the first thing I want to do then to make it possible to complete a task is to create a new view. So if I just open up views.py in the views app, then I can create the new function here, def mark completed, pass in the request parameter and the pk so it's easy to get the task. Then I can just get the task the same way I did up here. And since this only is supposed to do one thing, we can set task.is underscore done equals true, and then task.save. And then the database should be updated. And then I can say return, redirect. We redirect it back to the front page and save. So that was really easy. Now we just need to add this to the urls.py file. So we can add it at the bottom here. Path mark underscore completed. Pass in the integer called primary key here as well. Views.mark completed. Set the name to be mark completed as well. Okay, so now we have the view and we have the URL. We just need to add a simple button to the list of tasks. So let's open up frontpage.html, add one more paragraph below here, and then in here we can say if task.is underscore done. Then we want to just print completed. Of course we are just showing undone task, so we will actually not see this, but it's nice to just have this. And if it's done, we show this, else we are going to show what's in here. Okay, better indentation. And then we say href use the URL function again, and we want to reference the mark completed path and pass in task.pk. Mark complete, and then close the paragraph tag and close there. Sorry, close the anchor tag and close the paragraph tag and save. So if I refresh now, we will see mark complete, and if I click it, it was removed from here because we are only seeing undone tasks. But if I go in here, you will still see it there. Great. Okay, so then we can head over to deleting tasks. So we can begin by creating the views.py for this. Def delete task, request, and primary key. And we need to get this from the database first. And then we can just add task.delete, call this as a function. And then we want to redirect us back to the front page like this. Then, as you might remember, we need the URLs here. So path delete underscore task. Oops, typo. It's supposed to be a parenthesis. It was supposed to be one of these there. And then /int primary key /views.delete task. Set the name also to be delete task. Save. And then we need a delete button. So on the front page, at the bottom here, we can add one more paragraph. href URL function for, URL delete task, pass in task.pk, and then delete. Now we close the anchor tag, close the paragraph, and save. So if I refresh now, we should see a delete button, and if I click it, it's deleted and it's nowhere to be found anymore. So I just want to copy this list of tasks here, and inside partials we want to create a new file and paste it here and save this as tasks.html. And then we can just do this instead, which makes the code much simpler. So include task/partials/tasks.html, save and refresh. Okay, we need to add one more so we just can see something here. Great, now we see it there again. And then we can copy this and use it on the category page as well. And we replace these 3 lines, so we don't have to rewrite all of that code over and over again. So if we go into alerts now, you can see that it's listed out like that. If we go into private, you can see here that edit, this is actually completed, and this is completed. I can delete the tasks here and be redirected to the front page. And that was it for this part. See you in the next video. Okay, there's one thing I think we are missing from this to-do manager, and this is a simple search. So let's start now by creating this. All of the tasks that we have titles and descriptions. And let's say that you have 100 tasks. It wouldn't be very effective to go through the whole list when you're looking for one specific task. So let's add a search. The first thing we need to do is to do some changes in the views.py. So we want to have this in the task here. So views.py in the task app. We can begin by importing one thing from Django. So from django.db.models import q. And this is something we need to do to make a little bit more advanced queries. Then below the front page, we can create a new view called search. Pass in request parameter. And then usually when we search, we are going to use a get parameter. So for example, query equals test. So then we want to get this here, or this from the URL based on this name. And to do that, we say query equals request.get with capital letters, .get query, and the default value will now be just an empty string. So if this isn't, for example, if it's just like this, query will be empty, but this variable will still be set with an empty string. And I can say if query to see if it has been set by the users. Now we say tasks equals task.objects.filter, and we can say title underscore underscore I contains, and I means that it's insensitive for capital and lowercase letters, equals query. But what if you now wanted to check if the description has this or the title? That's where the Q comes in. So before here we say Q like that, and now we can pipe this and say Q description underscore underscore I contains equals query. So now we will get the tasks where either the title or the description contains the query that we are searching for. And if there isn't a query, we can just say tasks equals an empty list, so that we know this when we are rendering the template. Now we need to render this by saying return render request task slash search.html. Now we can pass in the query so that we know what the user has searched for, and also the tasks. So now we get all of the tasks and the query. Great. So before we create the template, we can just add this to the urls.py file. So at the bottom here we say path, and when the path is search slash, then we want to render the view called views.search. Give it a name, search, and save. Then we can create the template, search.html, and let's just copy a little bit from the front page. So we can copy all of this actually and just remove some of it. Just need to close and the content block, and then we remove the form, and then the title can say search or search results. Now we can say here you searched for query, like that. And below here we will now then print out all of the tasks. So if you go here and say search, then it's empty and there are no. And if I add query here and say first, then you will see the first task there. Cool. And if I remove this again, it's empty. And now we need to just tell this to the user. And that's when this very cool thing from Django comes in, empty. So instead of checking if tasks is set, we can actually loop through this and then add an empty function or tag down here and say p no matches for your query, and save. And if I add the query again here now first, then we will see the tasks list. Perfect. And we didn't need to rewrite this here again. We just copy this one line, so we don't have to actually have all of this text all of the time. And that's very great. That's one of the principles of Django actually. So then up in the menu, I want to have a search field. So let's open up nav.html. And below where we print menu, or we can actually change this to do and have it to be an h1 tag. And below here we can say form method equals get. And since this is a search, we almost always just use a get request instead of a post request, because then we can change the URL as we want. The action should not just go to dot, because we don't want to search on the page you are on, but a specific page called URL and search. And then we do not need a CSRF token here, since this is a get request. In here though, we now need one field for the query, so input type search. We're not using type text, but search, because then we get a clear icon we can use. Give it the name of query, and placeholder can be find a task. And then next to this we want a button called search. Close the button, close the form, and save. So if I go back and refresh now, you'll see the to-do title there, and find a task. We can then say hello. Okay, no tasks for that one. What about first? Yes, that was working. Maybe we can just print out how many tasks there are in case there are many. Then that can be a nice thing to know. So if I find search.py, which gave then tasks.length, sorry, count is the best way to count this, which gave results. So if I save now, which gave 1 results. Perfect. And if I just let's run it, 0 results. Perfect. So go ahead and test this out a little bit yourself. That was it for this video. I hope you liked it, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, it's time to implement Tailwind to make this project look a little bit better. So I have opened up my documentation for the Tailwind CS CLI. And by the way, you can use this tutorial for any Django project out there if you want to do it with another project than that we are building right now. Anyways, so I'm in the docs and I'm going to use the Tailwind CLI for doing this. So I'm just going to copy this command here, go to the command line, and then I'm in the same folder as, for example, manage.py here. So to install this you need npm and node running on your computer, and then I can just paste this command here, npm install tailwind css and tailwind css CLI. So now it is installed, and you can see that I have a folder called node modules, which should be filled with a little bit like tailwind CSS and things that tailwind CSS is dependent on. Next, I need to create a new file where this can be. So if I just go to the editor, and then in the root folder, I create a new folder called static. And in this static folder, I create one more called CSS. In the CSS folder, I create a new file called main.css and paste this line here. Okay, we are still not done, but we are good on the way. So let's copy this here and go back to the terminal and paste it here. npx, so then we run the CLI and set that the input field where we want to get Tailwind from, which is this one. We say static css main.css, and we want to output this into something called static css main.min for minified css -- watch, which means that this command will compile this file into there, and watch means that every time we do a change in our project, this will be compiled. So now this will just be running in the background over here. So if I now open up this here, you can see that we have a few things that comes from Tailwind. Okay. If I now try to open up this project in the browser, you can see that nothing has changed. And that's because we have not included this CSS file yet. So let's open up base.html, and below the title we can say link rel style sheet. And the href or the URL for this is a new a new template tag from Django called static. And I'm just css/main.min.css and close the link. If I save now, I will get an error because this is an invalid block tag. So did you forget to register or load? Yes, I did. This should go at the top here, load static, and save. And if I then refresh, I get now a new error, a 404, because Django can't find this here. And that's because we have not configured Django to tell Django where the static files are. So you can see that the URL, or the default URL, is this one, but Django still doesn't know where our static files is. So to do that, we say static files underscore dirs equals, and then a list. In here we paste in, or write base underscore dir, which is configured automatically from Django here, which is the root folder of our project. And then we say /static and save. If I now go back and refresh, you can see that the design changed dramatically because now Tailwind is implemented. Okay, so that's how easy it is to implement Tailwind. Now we can do some changes to the menu to make it look a little bit better. So if I just open up nav.html, I can add a class attribute and say py6 and px8. This gives spacing in the vertical direction and the horizontal direction. It's a little bit clearer if I add the background as well. So bg purple 800, refresh. And maybe we should also set the text to be white, so it's a little bit easier to read what's in here. We can make this a little bit larger by saying text, class text XL, refresh, great. Next step then will be to move the search form over to the right side, so we can say flex to make this a flexible box. So at least now they are next to each other, but they are not even on the same line. To get them on the same line, we set items center, refresh, a little bit better. And now we need to take all this available space and put between these two. And to do that, we say justify between. So we justify all of the space between the available object, which is this h1, and the form. Okay, so I can add a little bit of a background to this field. So here, class py2 to give some space, px4 and bg purple 600, and also rounded corners. We should also do something with this button, so it's a little bit easier to actually see that it is a button. So add a new class attribute. We can say py2 px4, so it's sort of the same size as the input field. And also give this rounded corners. The background can be sky, so bg sky 500, and set the text to be white. Okay, a little bit better. I also want the cursor to change, so cursor pointer. So you feel that you can actually click this. Maybe we can have a hover background as well, so hover colon bg sky 700. Awesome. And this space here should also be applied down here and also on the footer. So let's take the footer first. Class py4 and px8. You can set the background color here. bg is slate 800 and text to be white. Nice. And then it's just this as well. So this should be in the base.html around this block tag. So main class py6 px8, fix the indentation and close the main tag. Awesome. Here I want to set the title to be a little bit larger. So I need to open up frontpage.html. This h1 tag can have a class of text XL and MB6, so you get some default space below the title. Next, I want to move these categories over on the right side. So to do that, I need to split these into two boxes. So I want one box for the content. So we can give this a section and fix the indentation. Remove that HR, and then we also want a sidebar like that and close it. If I save now, nothing happens besides the HR was removed. So I need to convert this into a flexbox, and I want this to take up more than half of the screen. So this section can have a class of W-2/3, so it takes up 66% of the screen, and then this should have the rest. We can add a class to that one as well, W13. You can't actually see that it fills out, so we can add the background here, BG gray 100. We can add a space and some rounded corners, so PY4, PX8 and rounded XL. Great. Next I want to do some modification to the task, because it's hard to see that this is the title and these are actually buttons you can click. So open up tasks.html and give this a class of font bold. And I want this to be on the left side, so the mark complete, then edit and then delete. The mark complete can be a green text button, so text emerald 500. The edit button can be yellow, so text yellow 500. And the delete button can be red, text rose 600. And then I want this next to each other as well. So I can add a new div here, give it a class name of flex, fix the indentation, close and refresh. And then we need some space between these, so we can say space x4. Great, and maybe each of the tasks should have a background color, so BG gray 100. And then we need some space in there as well, so P-4. And maybe also rounded corners, refresh. And last thing we need to do here then is to add some space between these. So on the front page we will add the flex box, space X4. Perfect. If I then go into a category, we can fix the title there as well. So open up detail.html in the category folder. Class text XL MB6. Refresh. Okay, so this makes things a little bit better. The forms still looks horrible, but that will be fixed in a separate part of this tutorial series. If you have any questions about Tailwind or anything else, feel free to leave a comment below and I will answer as soon as I can. See you in the next video. Hey guys, now it would be cool to make it possible to separate tasks based on the users. So to do this we need to make it possible for users to register, and then we will connect the tasks to the users. So you can begin by creating a new app for the user profile. So if you just go to the terminal and stop the web server, then I can say python manage.py start app user profile. Django comes built in with functionality for creating and logging in users, but I want something for just having the views and templates. So I'm going to use the app for this. And when that's done, we can go to the settings.py file and just register the app we just created, user profile, and save. So next step then will be to set up the view for registering a user. So go into user profile, views.py. And then here you can create a new function, def signup, pass in the request parameter. In here we want to check if the user has submitted the form or not. So if request.method equals post, and if so we can say form equals user creation form. This actually comes from Django. And then in here we just pass in the information that the user has filled in, request.post. I can check if this form is valid by saying if form.is valid, and if so we can save this by saying user equals form.save. And this form.save will actually return the user, so then we can have the user in a variable here. And we want to do that because then we can say login, request and user, and then the user will be automatically logged in and authenticated. And when the user is authenticated, we can say return redirect and just pass in the front page. So now we will be redirected to the front page of our application. And if it's not a request, sorry, if it's not a post request, now we know that the user is just visiting this page. So we need to create an empty instance of this form like this. Now we can render by saying return, render, pass in the request parameter, and then the template user profile slash signup.html. And now we need to pass in the form so that the template can actually use what we have created here. This will now crash because there are a few things we have not imported. For example, redirect, which is a shortcut from Django. Then we want to import the login function from django.contrib.auth import login and this user creation form. So from django.contrib.auth.forms import user creation form and save. So most of this should hopefully look familiar for you based on what we have learned so far in this tutorial series. Next step then will be to create this template where we can render the form. So inside the user profile app, create a new folder called templates, and in there one more folder called user profile, and in that folder the file called signup.html. This should look very similar to other templates, so we can just copy everything here and paste it. And for the title we can say sign up, and same with the browser title sign up, and then below here we render the form. Form method is post, action will be the page that we are on. Then we need to add the CSRF token, close the form, and then render it in here, form.sp, and then a button to submit this. So button class py4 px8 bg purple 800 text white and rounded xl to get some rounded corners on this button. Submit and close the button. So we are going to customize this form a little bit later in this series. Next step then, we just need to create a URLs file for this. So in the user profile app, one more file called urls.py. Now we need to import path from Django. So from django.urls import path. And we need to import the views file from the user profile from .import views, and then set up the URL patterns list. Patterns. And we're only going to have one for now, so path signup slash, and when this is matching we can say views.signup name signup and save. And then we need to import this URLs file into the main URLs, just like we did with these two. So we can have this at the bottom here, path empty include user profile.urls. Actually, I would like to have this on top because this tasks URL will be the one that matches the front page where this can be empty. So for now we can just have it in this order. If I now go back to the browser, I need to run the server. Refresh, and if I now go to sign up, then I will be presented with the sign up form. Let's try to create a user. Submit, and then I was redirected to the front page. That means that this was actually working now, and we have now the possibility to create users. In the next part we're going to learn about how we can authenticate them by having a sign-up form. Sorry, a sign-in form, of course. So, see you in the next video. Okay, in the previous part we learned how to sign up users, so we now have this sign-up form. Next step then will be to log in users or sign in users. So Django has a built-in way to do this. So you just need to go back to the editor and find the urls.py file inside the user profile app. Then below here we can say path, sign in, and what this should use is auth views .loginView.asView. And then we need to specify what template we are going to use. So template name user profile /signup.html. Sorry, sign in, of course, signin.html. Okay, so we just need to import this from Django now. So at the top here, from django.contrib.auth.views, from django.contrib.auth import views as auth views, and we need to rename this or have this as a different name because we don't want it to crash with the import views from this app. So now we just refer to auth views inside here by saying auth views. Login view comes and return one variable called form, just like we have done in the sign app. So we can save now and then create the template sign-in.html, and we can copy everything from here because it's going to be very similar. Sign in, and save. And this can just be like it is because we have followed the Django convention of naming a form as this. So that means that this will work out of the box. So if I now go to the browser, I should be able to say sign in, and then I will see this form, and I can log in with the user I created in the previous part. So you can see now I was redirected to accounts/profile. We can set up, this is the default place that you will be redirected after authentication in Django. But we can override this by saying login redirect URL front page. So then we will be redirected there instead. We can also set the logout to redirect URL to front page, or actually sign in. So if you log out, you will just be sent to the sign in form. So if I go back here now, sign in, try to log in one more time, then I'm sent here. Perfect. So now we have sign up and sign in functionality. In the next part, we're going to learn how to log out. See you in the next video. Before I start working on the logout functionality, I just want to change this a little bit. Because when we are logged in, I want to show a log out button. And when we are logged out, I want to show the sign in and sign up button. So let's find the template for this. It should be located in the in the task and nav.html. Next to the form, or actually we can set above here, if request.user.is authenticated, then we know that the user is authenticated and we can show this form. If not, we should show two buttons for signing up and signing in. So we can close this and or if loop. So let's close this and if. And in here we create two buttons. So href should go to sign up, class py2 px4 bg sky 500 text white, sign up, copy this and rename the URL to sign in, and this can actually be slate, so it's sort of a grayish color. Refresh and we can see them because we actually is authenticated already. But next to the form we can have a log out button. So button log out. And then we can copy the classes from this one, paste it in, save and refresh. So now we have the logout button there. We need the rounded corners of this, of course, and the same here. Rounded XL and rounded -XL. Much better. But this does not work. And newer versions of Django require us to use a form for logging out. So we need to wrap this button inside the form. Form action. This should go to a URL called log out. I will come back to that very soon. Method should be set to post, and then we need to add the CSRF token here as well. Then we just indent this button and close the form. So if I save now, go back and refresh, then I will get the reverse for logout not found. Okay, that's correct. We need to add that to the user profile /urls.py. We have already imported auth views, so we can just add a new path there. Sign out. And auth views.logout view.asView. This is not a template or a view you can just see, so we don't need to specify a template here. Just need to set name to sign out. Maybe that was not what I used in the navigation bar. So there, sign out. So if I refresh now, I should be able to click this, and then no reverse match for sign out. Why? Reverse for sign in, not found, sorry. urls.py, I forgot to give this a name. Sign in and save. So if I refresh now, that was working. Let's try to log in one more time. Submit. Wrong password. So now I'm logged in, this appears. If I log out, I should see sign in and sign up. But that does not have any classes. Why did not that work? BG Slate 500. This is running. BG Gray 500. Does that work? Yes. But we do not want all of that space in there. So let's add one more class here with the flex and space x4. Then we fix this indentation, save, refresh, it's moved over there, and we have a little bit of space between them. So now we actually have everything that we need for authentication. We can sign up users, we can sign out and sign in. If I try to visit the front page now, we should not see this because we are not signed in. And to do this, we just go over to task views.py, and at the top here we can say login required. This is something that we need to import from Django. So from django.contrib.auth.decorators import login required. And this is what's called a decorator. And this is sort of a functionality that Django goes through before you see this view. And this decorator will see if you are authenticated or not. If I refresh now, I will be sent to the login page, except we have not set up that in the settings.py file yet. We have the redirect URLs for logging in and logging out, but we need to set login URL as well. And this is also sign in. So if I now try to go here, I will be presented with the login form. Perfect. Let's just go into views.py here, copy this and paste it above the search, above the edit task, above the mark completed, and above delete task. So now you can no longer visit any of these without being authenticated. I think this can also be added to the views.py for the category. Now we just need to import from django.contrib.auth.decorators import login required and save. Great. So now we have guarded all of the views that we need to do. In the next part we're going to start customizing the form a little bit. So see you in the next video. So these forms looks like shit now because they are not styled at all. There are a couple of ways that we can do this. We can create a custom form in Python and add attributes, or we can render them manually. So if we find sign in, we can do it manually to that one to test it out. So instead of this, we're actually going to add HTML and stuff here. So to render the forms, we say form.nonField errors. So this is in case that the username has been taken or similar. And then we can show the label form.username.id for label. Username, close the label, and below here we say form.username. So if I save this now, go back and refresh, you'll see that this looks exactly the same. So how do we style this? If I inspect this, I can see that the HTML for this looks like this. I can do this if I wanted to, and then add clauses here. For example, border gray 200. There it came. So this is probably not the best way to do this. We would like to be able to add clauses to this using Python. That's the cleanest way to do this. So if I go back here, just remove this, and this can be like it is. And then I go into views.py. And then inside the user profile, I create a new file here and save it as forms.py. So I want to override the authentication form that Django has built in. From django.contrib.auth.forms import authentication form and username field. And then I also want to import forms from Django, so from Django import forms. Then we can say class user login form authentication form is what we're going to use here. And then we need to set up the initialization method for this, def init self args and k-args, because we want to allow the arguments correctly here. And then we need to call the function inside the authentication form, user login form. So we just use the same name here because that's the easiest way to do this. Pass in self and then init, we call the initialization for the parent args and k-args. So everything is just passed directly through. And then here I say username equals username field, which I imported there. Widget equals forms.text input. And then I need to specify which attributes that I want to use here. So attrs equals create a dictionary class, and then py for px for border gray 200 and rounded xl, for example. You can do whatever you want here. And we want to override the password field. So password equals forms. This does not have a password field, so we just use the forms from Django. Char field widget equals, and this should then say forms.password input, and then we specify the attributes here as well. Attrs equals class, and then we can copy these clauses here like that and save. I think this should work. We will test it out very soon. We just need to go to the urls.py and import this form that we just created. So from.forms import user, sorry, I forgot the name. User login form, of course. So from .forms import user login form, and together where we specify the template name, we can say authentication underscore form equals user login form. So now we use the form that we have created. So if I save now, go back and refresh, you can see that we now have the styling. We have a double username. Let's go in here. Let's just remove these two. I think we can just have it like this actually. And now we can see that this looks a little bit better. Great. If we want some space between these two, we can add a div here. Class py4. Sorry, space dash y4. And then we close this div and fix the indentation and refresh. This button can also have empty -4 and refresh. So now this form looks much better, and this is something that we can do with all of the other forms as well if we wanted to do that. So instead of repeating this over and over for the other forms, you can try to have this as a task for yourself to customize the sign up form as well. So that was it for this part. In the next part we're going to make it possible for the user to show only their tasks. See you in the next video. Okay, so now I want to make it possible that these tasks here should only be your tasks. What if a different user has added a task? You don't want to see them and you don't want other people to see your tasks either. So we need a connection between the task and the user. So if I go to the editor and then find task/models.py, then we need to import the user model from django.contrib.auth.models import user, and then we add a new field at the top here. Then the user equals models.foreign key user, which is this model we just imported. Set up the related name to be tasks, so we can get all of the tasks belonging to one user. On delete models.cascade. So if we delete the user, all of the tasks will also be deleted automatically. And that was it for the models. We can just close this, go to the terminal, stop the web server and run the make migrations again. Python manager.py make migrations. And then we have a little warning here because this is a non-nullable field, meaning that all tasks should have a user connected to it. So I want to provide a 1-off default for now. So just type 1 and hit enter. And then I just need to pass in the ID of a user, which should be 1 because I have already created one user in the database. So hit enter and then we run the migrate script. Great. So now we have a table or an index in the database where we connect a task to a user. Then I can run the web server again. Go back and refresh and nothing has happened yet. So now I want to get only my tasks. So if I go to the editor, just want to close a few of these files here to make it a little bit cleaner. If I now go into task and find views.py, then I need the user model here. Okay, so here where we get the tasks from the database, we can add one more filter here. .filter user equals request.user, and a request automatically comes with the user that we have authenticated. So if I say save now, go back and refresh, I did not get those tasks because I probably have one more user in the database. Let's check that out. Python manager.py shell users equals user.objects.all users. Okay, yes, I have this admin user and I assigned all of the tasks to the ID 1 user. That's why it was not working. Let's fix that. Tasks equals task.objects.all tasks. Yes, okay, for task in tasks task.user equals user.objects.get pk equals 2, which is the code with Stein user I used when signing up. Task.save. Now I can stop this and run the server again. So if I refresh now, then I got my tasks showing here. Perfect. Now we just need to do the same thing for the search. So here we can just say filter user equals request.user. And the same with the edit tasks. You don't want to make it possible for users to just change the ID up in the URL. So we need to make sure that this here also take this into consideration. So here I say user equals request.user. Just need to check that this is working. Yes. Great. And we can do the same thing for the mark completed and delete task. So now we only get tasks for the user that we have created. If we try to create a new task now, then we will get an error. Let's try to see what happens. So if I go to the front page now, try to create a new task, submit, then I will get a non-null constraint failed because we have not set the user ID yet. So we can fix that by here saying that if this is valid, the error comes here when we try to save this in the database. So we can set task equals form.save, commit equals false, which means that we are creating an instance of the task, but we are not storing it in the database yet. And we can have task.user equals request.user and task.save. And then it will be stored in the database and it should be connected to the user. Refresh and have one more task here. There, perfect. So that means that this is also now working. So now we know how to connect this as well to the user and how to get only our data. Perfect. As a task, you can do the same thing for the category. So what you have to do then is to open up the models in here, connect this to a user model, and then you need to do some changes in here as well, so you only get the categories that belongs to you. That was it for this part. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit like below, and I'll see you in the next video. One very important part of Django is to keep the models as fat as possible and the view as thin as possible. We don't want logic inside the views, we want to set this inside the models. So we generally want to have as simple views as possible, because it doesn't make sense to put functionality in there. We don't want to have too much going on in here. Functionality that can be reused should be located in the models. So in this part of the series, we will add a custom function to one of our models to see how that should look like. So we have this category model here, and then I want to add a counter here so that we know how many tasks that are connected to this model. Then we add a new method here by saying def number of tasks, pass in the self parameter. Now we say return self.tasks.count. And it's important the ordering of everything here. We like to have all of the fields first in a model, then we want the meta class for configuration, then the override of the built-in functionality or functions in this class, and then the custom methods that we add later. So then we now have a new property we can use on this model. So if I find the detail page for a category, next here I can say just test and go back to here and into alerts. Okay, so instead of saying test here, I want to show the count. We could then just say category.number of tasks. Save and refresh, and then I get 4, because there are 4 tasks connected to this category. So that was a very quick part, but at least now you know how to create new functionality for the models. You could do this same thing here if you wanted to, for example, get the full name of a category inside the task model, or if you wanted to, for example, say def short description self return self.description, and then, for example, if you only wanted 10 first characters in here. So there are a lot of different things you can do with this type of functionality. Anyways, in the next part we will start learning more about template filters. See you in the next video. Hey guys, in this video we're going to learn a little bit more about template filters, what they are and how to use one. A template filter can be used to work with and manipulate data in our templates. They can be used for a lot of things like date formatting, humanizing, transform text to uppercase and similar. In this part I will begin by showing the date filter and after that the natural time filter. But first we need to know when a task was added in the database. So let's just create a new field here, created at equals models.datetime field auto now add equals true. Which means that every time we create a new task, this field will be automatically filled out by Django. Now we just need to stop the web server again, run the make migrations. So let's type 1 and now, or timezone.now to fill this in automatically, and then the migrate again. So now all of the tasks should have a field, and we know that when this was added to the database. If I go to the front page, then we should somehow just show when a task was created down here. If I go into frontpage.html, we have this list of tasks, which is this file here. Below the title we can say time and then task.created_at. Close the time, refresh. And then this is formatted automatically by Django this way. But we can override this if we wanted to do that. So here, to add the template filter, we add this pipe symbol and say date. And many of these filters accept parameters. So to add a parameter, we say colon and then these tuples. No, that's not a tuple. Anyways, this quotes, that's a better word. Now we can say Y to only get the year when this was created, -m to get the month, and -d to get the day. If I wanted to know which hour, we can say capital H. We can get the hour by saying I, like that, and also the second if you wanted to do that. So there are a lot of different things you can do to configure this. You can check out djangoproject.com. There are a full list of what you can do to this date filter here. You can try a different one, just add one more time and set task.created_at. Pipe this into natural time, close, and this invalid time, natural time. That might be because we need to load something up here called load humanize. Refresh, that was not correct. Django template filter humanize. That is not correct. Humanize, why did that not work? It should be this, so that you can see now or 29 seconds ago and similar. Natural time, have I written? No, it should be correct. Okay, sorry, I need to add this to my list of installed apps, sorry. So if I open up settings.py, I need to add this at the end there. So if I now refresh here, I should see that here 3 minutes ago this was added. Perfect. Load humanized, that's just a list of more template filters. As you can see here, you can get the AP number, the int comma, into word, natural day, etc. So we have a few things that you get when you load humanize. You can also say time since, which is not from humanize, but it's a little bit different because then it just say 3 minutes. So you know how long time ago it was created. You can say ago there if you wanted to do that. So that's how easily it is to add template filters to Django. In the next part we're going to learn more about pagination. Django has built-in functionality for paginate things like tasks. Let's say that we just wanted to show 2 tasks at a time here. So if I now go to the views.py, you can learn how to implement this. So I just need to find task and views.py. At the top we can import what we need from Django. So from django.core.paginator, import paginator with capital P, and empty page and page not an integer. Then below here where we get the tasks, we can just get them like we have done before, but we need to do a little change here. We can do this below this here, so that in case we are submitting a form we don't have to go through the pagination thing. So then we need to get the page number from the URL. So page equals request.get page and default this to 1. And then we need to set up the paginator. Paginator equals paginator. Pass in tasks, which is all of the tasks from the database, and 2. So we only get 2 from this list. And then we say try tasks equals paginator.page page. So first we just try to get the page that we are wanting to get from the URL, except page not an integer. So in case it's not a number, let's say it's a letter because someone has changed the URL, then we just automatically get page 1 equals paginator.page 1. And if it's an empty page, then we just get the last page here. So accept empty page, oops, typo, tasks equals paginator.page tasks.num pages. We know how many pages there are. So then we can just save this and the backend should be ready. If I now go back and refresh here, I should only get 2 tasks. So then I know that I should have a next button and a previous button there. So I can find the front page.html, and then below here, where we are looping through the tasks, you can say if tasks.has next, and if there are a next page, then we add an href and just say question mark page equals tasks.next page number. Next, close this and save. Refresh. So now I have this next there. If I click it, you can see that this changed and the page number up there changed. If I go to page 3, the page button for next is gone. So we need a previous button as well. So that's just tasks.has previous and previous, and I might be previous page number. Previous, yes. So now I can go back and forth here. Great. If I want to know how many pages there are, I think I can say total pages tasks.total num pages. Save and refresh. That was not the correct one. What is that variable? Tasks.num pages, sorry. So if I refresh now, that was not correct either. There, tasks.paginator.num pages, sorry. So now we have the next, previous, and also know how many pages there are in total. So that's how easy it is to implement pagination. You can do the same thing in the search or in the categories as well if you want to do that to learn even more about this. So that was it for this video. In the next one we're going to learn about how to insert messages here when we, for example, create a new task. See you in the next video. Okay, when we create new tasks, it would be cool to show a little bit information here on the top so that we know that the task has been created successfully and similar. Django comes with something called a messages framework. So let's go to views.py and import this. We just say from django.contrib import messages. And here, when we had created a new task, we can say messages.success. So it's a success message. Pass in the request parameter. The task was added. Let's also add an extra tag so that we have a HTML class we can use if we want to do that. So extra tags, BG Emerald 500. So we can save this now, and nothing will happen if I create a new task now. Let's just do that so it's done and tested. Submit. Nothing happens. So we need a way to print this, and this is something I like to do in the base.html. So let's open up that, and below the navigation we can say if messages. This is default by Django called messages, and if, and in here I can say for message in messages. So we'll loop through all of them. And for, so that's how you loop through them. Div class py for px6 and message dot tags, I think it is, to get the background color, text white, rounded XL, and my6. So we get space above and below. And here we just print the value of this one. Close the div. And if I refresh now, there should be one message. If I refresh, it's gone. So what this does is that it adds one message to the session that the user is connected to. And once it's shown, it's removed from the session. So if I try to add one more now, submit, then the message is there. If I refresh, it's gone. Awesome. You can do the same thing with error messages or success message when you have deleted or edited a task as well. So that's a little task for you to learn more about this. Learn more about messages.danger or messages.warning and try to implement them. In the next video, we're going to learn more about email sending. So see you in the next video. Hey guys, sending emails is a very important part of almost all web applications. In this video, I want to show you how we can do this using Django. We are not going to actually send the email, I'm just going to show it in the console, but the process is the same. So if I open up settings.py, I just need to configure Django to show this in the console. To do that, I say email_backend equals django.core.mail.backends.console.email_backend. Usually you would change this to, for example, email backend that it is a SMTP, and then you will just need to configure the username here and a little bit like that. But this is very important because now it's very easy for us to test emails in the console and similar. And then to send the email, we need to import one function from Django, from django.core.mail import send_mail. We can send a very simple test here where we show the success message send_mail, and then the subject and the message and who should send this from @example.com. This is then the sender, and who should receive this, and the receiver should be an array. So hi@hello.com and test@hello.com. So these two will now receive this email, and the last parameter for this send mail function is fail silently equals false, because we want to show errors if there is anything wrong. If I save now, go back here, there is nothing there. So let's try to create a task. and submit. Task was added, and if I go here now, you should see something like this. So you can see here that there is an email being sent, the subject, who it is sent from, who it's sent to, and then the content, the message. Great. So that's how easy it is to send plain and simple HTML mails. You could also learn more about how to send HTML, for example, Django email multi alternatives. If I then go into the documentation for Django, you can see here, this is the one example that I used. If you scroll down here, you will see how easy it is to send HTML as well. So you just set up this render to string, which references a template. And the templates here looks exactly as a normal HTML template in the rest of our project. But instead of using the send mail, we use a function called email multi-alternatives, which takes a text content and the HTML and similar and just send it. So you just copy this and then replace this send mail functionality. And then the user will receive HTML in their email inbox. As you saw at the top here, there are a few email APIs you can use as well if you want to send using SMTP. I usually go with Mailgun or Mailjet. They are very easy to use and easy to set up with Django. I guess if I just search Mailjet Django, we should get some information about how to do that. You can actually just use this, for example, the Django Mailjet project. Then just set this as the backend, set up these, which you get in the dashboard for Mailjet. And you can then send free emails. I think it's 200 or something like that per month for free. Anyways, that was it for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please hit like below, and I will see you in the next video. Hey guys, it's now been 30 days of Django. So where do you go to the next level? Hopefully you have learned quite a lot of Django in the last 30 days. Even though you just learned the basics of Django, there is still a long way to go. I run my YouTube channel where you can learn a lot more about Django and also other technologies. I also have some premium Django courses on my website codewithstein.com if you're interested in that as well. And I think that after this introduction to Django, you should be able to follow along most of my videos and series. And that's also my suggestion for you. Just go through as many tutorials as you can, and when you're done with a lot of tutorials and you feel that you have started to learn more, start building some small and simple project for yourself. And then you can go back to the tutorials if you need to refreshen anything. No one expects you to remember everything you have learned, so there's nothing wrong by going back and do a tutorial over and over again, or if it's just a simple part that you need to check up. So thank you so much for following along. Feel free to leave a comment below if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for new videos I can make. See you in the next video.